They simply aren't convinced either way. They are not 100% sure there is no God, but neither are they sure that there is a God. And so, they don't worry about it. They see it as unimportant to their daily lives. We recently had a census in the UK, I think it was 2011, there was a census taken, and a large number of people are now ticking no religion or no religious belief. Because they simply see that the existence or non-existence of Allah has no bearing on their day-to-day lives. So, they are practical atheists. They are practical atheists. Not because they are sure about their atheism, but simply because they have not yet seen a convincing reason to believe. But there's a question here. There's a question here. Whether people are staunch atheists or whether they're just practical atheists, they are practically atheists. If this is something fitri, then why are we trying to prove it to them? I'm about to give you some examples of arguments you can use. Why are we trying to, how can we prove this to them in something fitri? We just said that you cannot teach someone something that is fitri. No, but you can remind them. So when we make these arguments for God's existence, we are not telling them something new, we are reawakening something in their souls. Why do you think that the Quran is called a dhikra? A remembrance, a reminder for you. This is something, the truth of this is something you already know in your heart of hearts. This is just to remind you of the truth. And so when we make these arguments, we are reaching out to this fitrah. But how can we prove the existence of God? What are the ways for proving the existence of God? Now, remember yesterday, what did we say the criteria for belief was? Yaqeen, certainty. And so the arguments we use in order to reawaken this fitrah, they must give us certainty. They cannot be emotional arguments. They cannot be emotional arguments of God's existence. We cannot simply tell someone, oh, have faith. God will make you so happy. Well, that may be true, but believing in the tooth fairy may make me happy. Believing in all manner of weird and wonderful things may make me happy. Why should I believe in God? So we want to give them yaqeen. We aren't interested in whether belief in God at this stage will make them happy or not. We simply want to establish that it is the truth. The truth. And that is why they should believe in it. But when we want to prove the existence of God to someone, we should not think, if this is a question that often gets asked. There was a course that we did a few weeks ago that I did on proving the existence of God. And one of the main questions that was asked by different people in that course was, what's the best argument for proving God's existence? What's the best argument? As if there is one magical argument, that if we can just master this argument, and then we go and tell someone, the veils will be lifted and they'll go, hallelujah, I've seen the light. There is no such argument. I wish there was. It would be so easy. You just go and pow, instant theist, instant mu'min. But you can't. You have to assess the person you are talking to. Imagine you want to cross a river. Imagine you want to cross a river. How many ways are there to cross a river? You could try and swim across if the current's not too strong. You could get a boat. You could row yourself across. You could build a bridge. The question is, how much luggage do you have with you? And the same is true for proving the existence of God. So there are some people who really, if you give them a simple argument for the existence of God, it'll click. And they'll say, yes, I see it now. I see it now. God does exist. But a lot of people will have more severe doubts. They'll have heavier doubts. They'll have more baggage to take across. It's going to take more than simply asking them to think for a moment to convince them of God's existence. And so people like this, well, you can't expect them, you can't just swim them across. You might need a boat. You might need to build a steel bridge across if they have a lot of doubts. So just as there are different ways of crossing the river, and each has its advantages and disadvantages. Some of them are simple, like a boat or swimming across, but they're not capable of bearing a lot of weight. On the other hand, there are other ways of crossing a river which are more complex, like the bridge, but they take time and preparation and a lot of effort to construct. And so proofs for the existence of God, proofs for the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are much the same as this. So when you're speaking to someone, or even when you're looking for your own purposes, when you want to know for yourself does Allah exist or not, you have to look at different kinds of arguments and see which argument will convince you or convince the person you are talking to the most. There is no one magic argument. Each argument is good for a different kind of person. Imam Ali alayhi salam. Imam al-Muwahhideen, the leader of the monotheists. When he was talking to a Bedouin, now a Bedouin, in those days, even today, Bedouins are people that live out in the desert, in tents, they have animals. Today some of them also have 4x4s, but in those days, their lives were even simpler. And the Bedouins, in the time of the Prophet, and Imam Ali, and all of the Imams, the Bedouins were known for being simple people. They weren't well educated, most of them could not read or write. They had very powerful memories. But for all intents and purposes, if you called someone a Bedouin, you were calling them a barbarian. You were calling them, in English we would say a Philistine, like someone who's uncultured. And so if you go to a Bedouin, if Imam Ali went to a Bedouin with a complex philosophical proof for the existence of God, what would happen? The Bedouin would just go, what? What are you talking about? That makes no sense. Those are just lots of long words you put together. That doesn't convince me. And he'd be right. Such a proof would not be convincing to a Bedouin. So what does Imam Ali do? He says to a Bedouin, now remember, Bedouins are people who live in the desert. They live with animals, they're in touch with nature. He says to the Bedouin, camel droppings indicate the passing of a camel. Footprints indicate the direction of travel. The sky has stars and the earth has valleys. Do these not point towards the all-hearing and all-seeing one? This the Bedouin understands. Yes, because the Bedouin spends his life looking at footprints and signs on the ground. They have to track animals they want to hunt. They need to know which way another tribe has gone, either to attack them or to avoid them. And so a Bedouin understands the idea of looking for traces. And so Imam Ali says, yes, but what about the stars and the valleys? Are they not Allah's traces? Are they not indications of the Creator, the all-hearing, the all-seeing one? Now there are two arguments, just two arguments I very briefly want to mention. The first is reflecting on God's signs, and this is a very simple argument. This is similar to the argument Imam Ali used. Because in the Quran, you find Allah mentions His ayat a lot. His signs. In the creation. He says, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of night and day, and the ships that sail upon the sea, with profit to men, and the water that Allah sends down from the sky, with which He revives the earth after its death, and scatters therein every kind of animal, and the changing of the winds, and the clouds disposed between the sky and the earth. In all of this are surely signs for a people who ya'qilun, who apply reason. And so, when we look at Allah's signs, what is Allah asking us to do? He's saying, look at all of this around you. Look at how harmonious this is. You live in a world that makes sense. Notice how He mentions ships sailing on the sea. Now, Allah is not saying, I created those ships and they've always been there and you just found them. No, Allah knows that it is men who build ships. But what is it that allow the ships to travel from A to B? The laws of physics and the weather. Allah is saying, look at the system of the universe, how elegant it is, and tell me it has come about by chance. If you were to find a book on a shelf and open it and to start reading without looking at the cover or any of the pages, you would know that this book had an author. And so when we see the universe all around us, on every leaf of every tree, on every cloud, on every atom, is written La ilaha illallah.
Subhanallah.
So this is one way of proving God's existence. And obviously you can go into more detail on this, but I'm just summarizing here. Something, if you're interested, you can go away, there are books you can read on this. The second argument I want to bring is the argument, and this is a philosophical argument, the argument from contingency. It's called the Burhan al-Imkan. And Allah says, in the earth assigns for those who have conviction, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ, and in your own selves, أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, will you not perceive? Now, just a point here. Have you noticed Allah switches? He says, in the earth assigns for those who have conviction. And then suddenly, and in yourselves as well. So he's talking about them, and then he switches to the second person. He switches to a direct address to you. It's as if Allah is jumping out at you and saying, and in yourselves as well. أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. Now, if we look at our own selves, what do we notice? We notice that we could not have brought our own selves into existence. But let's go deeper. Let's go to the very building blocks of the universe. And what are the three fundamental particles we learn about in chemistry in secondary school? Protons, neutrons, and electrons. Now, there are particles, yes, smaller than protons and neutrons, but for the purposes of this argument, let's say that you have protons, neutrons, and electrons, and everything in the universe is made up of those particles. Can a proton, a neutron, or an electron bring itself into being? No. Can it bring another thing like itself into being? No. So where did it come from? If we look at the very fundamental building blocks of the universe, we see that they have two properties. They are limited and they are dependent. They are existentially needy. They need to derive their existence from somewhere else. So we ask where they come from. Now let's say an atheist gives an answer. He says something to do with quantum physics. Then what do we have to say? Well, we have to say, well, where did that come from? And we have to keep asking where things came from until we arrive at a being that is neither limited nor dependent. And as soon as you have a being that is neither limited nor dependent, you have the infinite, the absolute, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is only by having firm belief in the existence of Allah, founded upon fitrah, founded upon our innate nature, that we can hope to follow the example set by Imam Hussain and his companions. And we can only obtain this firm belief through reflection and contemplation. Only in this way can we be sure that we are not slaves to this world. That we are not slaves to this world. One person who had this belief, one person who had this firm belief, was a companion of Imam Hussain called Habib ibn Muzahir. Now Habib ibn Muzahir, on the day of Karbala, according to some narrations, was 75 years old, which means he was a companion not just of Imam Hussain, not just of Imam Hassan, not just Imam Ali, but the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa Habib ibn Muzahir fought in all the battles of Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali. He fought in all of his battles, and he saw his friends and companions martyred in those battles, and he became sad. And so one day he goes to Imam Ali. In fact, he would frequently go to Imam Ali and ask about Shahada. He would ask about martyrdom. He would ask, will I be honored with martyrdom? And Imam Ali would say, yes, you will be, but not yet. And we have some indications that he had been told, he was one of the close companions of Imam Ali, and he had been told things about the future. And so one day, when he is sitting down for food with his wife in Kufa, and there is a knock at the door, he asks, who is it knocking at the door? He calls out, And from behind the door answers, I am the messenger of Imam Hussain to you. He opens the door and he's handed a letter. And on that letter he reads the words of Imam Hussain, the grandson of the Prophet, saying, Habib ibn Muzahir, I am coming to you. I need your assistance. I need your help. And his wife is sitting eating. And she asks, what's the matter? Who is at the door? And he says, there was a letter from Hussain ibn Ali. And she said, what did it say? He wants me to go to him. He's coming. And he needs my help. And he wants to see how his wife feels about it. Because he knows. He's 75 years old. He's been waiting all of his life for Shahada. And this letter comes. And he knows that he must go and he will not return. And so he says, he's asking for my help. And his wife, he doesn't appear happy. And so his wife asks him, do you not want to go and help Hussain? And he says, I don't know. I have to think about it. And she becomes upset and she begins to weep. But not out of sorrow at the thought of her husband leaving. She weeps, Habib, Ibn bint Rasulullah, the son of the daughter of the Prophet, writes to you asking for help. And this is how you respond. Oh Habib, have you forgotten what his grandfather said? That he is one of the Sayyida Shabab Ahl al-Jannah. Have you forgotten what his grandfather said? That Hussain is from me and I am of Hussain? Hussain has sought your help. So do not fall short. Do not fall short in going to him. Go to him. And go to him from me. Go in my place. Go in my place. Because I am a woman and I know nothing of war. I cannot fight in battle, so you go instead of me. And when you meet Hussain, give him my salams. Give him my salams. Allahu Akbar. The faith of this woman. She doesn't need to think for a moment. She's saying, go to Hussain. He needs you. And so, Habib ibn Muzahir leaves Kufa under cover of darkness because Ibn Ziyad has complete control over the city and he's looking for anyone trying to leave to help Hussain. He wants no one to reach Hussain, and so Habib ibn Muzahir leaves under cover of darkness. And he reaches Imam Hussain and his camp at Karbala on the 6th of Maharum, in a few days' time. And when he arrives, he tells Hussain, Hussain, I have some tribesmen from my tribe, the Banu Asad nearby. I can go and bring them, they will help you. And he goes to his tribe and he convinces them to come, but there is a spy amongst them who warns Umar ibn Sa'ad, la'natullahi alayh, that these horsemen are coming, that this tribe is coming to help Hussain. And so Umar ibn Sa'ad ambushes them and drives them away. And Habib ibn Muzahir comes back to Umar and says, I'm sorry, I brought them, but it wasn't enough. We were ambushed. I could not help you. And Hussain says, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. We are satisfied with God's decision. And Habib ibn Muzahir, on the day of Ashura, was one of the foremost people who argued with the soldiers of Umar ibn Sa'ad and responded to their taunts. And he was given command of the left flank of Hussein's forces. He was given command of the left flank. And when the time for prayer came and Imam Hussain asked for respite, he asked the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad to give them a few minutes to say their prayers. A man called Hassin ibn Tamim called out from the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, it makes no difference, your prayers will not be accepted. And Habib ibn Muzahir becomes angry. This is the man who fought with Imam Ali in all of his battles. He says, are you saying that the prayer of Ali Muhammad will not be accepted, but your prayer will, Ya Himar, O donkey? And so, at this point, Hassin steps forward to fight him, and Habib ibn Muzahir is smiling. And before he goes into battle, one of his companions says, Habib, why are you smiling? This is a battle, we're going to die. This is not a time for happiness. And Habib looks at him and yet he almost laughs. He says, we are about to become shuhada. What better time is there to laugh than now? This is someone who has conviction in his Lord. And Habib goes forth and he's like a lion. He's a man of 75 years, and yet the enemy scatter before him. According to some accounts, on his way to Hassin ibn Tamim, he slays 30 men. And he's fighting with Hassin, this man who he's had this taunting match with. And he strikes Hassin down from his horse. He knocks Hassin off his horse. And soldiers from Umar ibn Sa'd's army rush to help him, to stop Habib ibn Muzahir from killing him. And Habib ibn Muzahir is fighting him, and none of them can better him, until one man from the tribe of the Banu Tamim strings an arrow and draws it and shoots Habib ibn Muzahir in the chest, and he goes down onto the ground, and the blood is gushing from his wound. And yet this man of 75 years is still trying to get up, and he's saying, Ya Aba Abdullah, I will not abandon you while I still draw breath. And then Hassin ibn Tamim comes and strikes him on the head. And he's still trying to get up. And a third man comes and finally cuts off his head. And they begin to quarrel over who gets to take the head to Ibn Ziyad and claim the reward. And when his head is brought to Kufa by his killer, Hassin ibn Tamim, his son, Qasim ibn Habib, sees the head. And he goes to this. He goes after Hassin ibn Tamim, the killer of Habib ibn Muzahir. He goes after him. He follows him. And Hassin becomes anxious. He says, "What do you want? Why are you following me?" Qasim ibn Habib says, "Nothing." He says, "No, there's something, Ya Bunay. My boy, tell me, what's the matter?" And Qasim ibn Habib says, "That is the head of my father. And I would ask that you give it to me so that I may bury it. So that I may bury it with his body." And Hassin says, "I will not give you his head because I want to take the reward from Ibn Ziyad." And Qasim ibn Habib says, "Ibn Ziyad may reward you for it, but Allah never will, for you have killed someone better than you." And then Qasim ibn Habib followed this man everywhere he went until he found an opportunity to take revenge and avenge his father. But I ask you, brothers and sisters, after the battle of Karbala, why was there no one there to ask for the head of Imam Hussain when it was brought through the streets of Kufa and the streets of Damascus, and the people were looking at the head of the grandson of the Prophet? Thousands of Muslims, and they would not ask, "Give us the head of Ibn bint Rasulullah that we may bury it." Why did Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam have to wait for so many years before he saw the head of Ibn Ziyad brought to him? Brothers and sisters, please raise your hands for dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma kun li waliyika al-hujjat ibn al-Hasan salawatuka alayhi wa ala aba'ih fi hadhihi as-sa'a wa fi kulli sa'a waliyan wa hafizan wa qa'idan wa nasiran wa dalilan wa 'aynan hatta tuskinahu ardaka taw'a wa tamati'ahu fiha tawila birahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. وصل يا رب على محمد وآله الطاهرين.